What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett. It's time to wrap up the top half of the Big 12 projections for this season. In my last two videos, I went over the teams kind of in the bottom half that I expect to be fighting for bowl contention. Then in my latest video, I went over Colorado, what they're bringing in, what they're bringing back this year, and what my expectations are for them. But in this video, I'm going to be going over the rest of the teams, 8 through 1. One of these teams actually falls below a couple of the teams I had in my kind of bottom-up video, but I'll go on to talk more in depth about each of these teams, kind of going through the first few teams a little bit quicker and then talking a little bit more in depth about the teams I expect to contend for the title seriously. But before I get into it, if you're going to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. But I'm going to start things out with Texas Tech. The Red Raiders went 7-6 last year, 5-4 in conference. They have 8 starters coming back, 4 on offense, 3 defense, and a kicker. So not a lot of continuity for this team. They have a couple talented players coming in. Offensively, they ranked 62nd, 59th, 62nd in scoring, 59th in rushing, 63rd in passing, and 64th in offense, or in total offense. So pretty middle of the road across the board. Quarterback Baron Morton leads the offense, running back Taj Brooks, and then they bring in from Washington State wide receiver Josh Kelly, and he's joined by a 5-star freshman Micah Hudson. Tight end Jalen Conyers is also one of their receiving threats as well. Brooks has rushed for 1,500 yards. He did last year, and he's going to be behind a revamped offensive line. I think the offense can take some steps, but they really have a backloaded schedule that I think will make it tough to compete in this Big 12. Defensively, kind of those same order, 61st in scoring, 84th rush, 74th passing, 79th against the pass, and their key guys are defensive linemen DeBraylon Carroll, linebackers Jacob Rodriguez and Ben Roberts, and then safety CJ Baskerville. I think this team could get off to a quick 5-0 start, but after that, the only games I really see as being winnable are, I think, home against both Baylor and Colorado, and also West Virginia to end the regular season. I think that game against West Virginia, they're going to be competing for bowl eligibility. I think they'll finish after that 5-0 start potentially with the 7-game losing streak, or at least 6 out of 7 losses to end the season. Moving ahead to West Virginia, the Mountaineers finished 9-4, 6-3 last year. They got off to a quick start, 4-1. Then they had back-to-back losses at Houston and against Oklahoma State, but then finished strong, going 5-1 down the stretch. They bring back 14 starters in total, 7 offense, 5 defense, and both specialists. They had a +2 turnover margin. Texas Tech was -6. I think that's another key factor. They have a very tough test, week 1 to open the season, but they get Penn State at home. So they're going to be able to host an Indy Lions. I think that'll be key, getting them at home there in Morgantown, West Virginia. Their offense ranked 38th in scoring, 3rd nationally in rushing, 89th passing, 27th total offense. Quarterback Garrett Green leads the way with 3 offensive linemen in front of him, led by left tackle Wyatt Millam. And then those 2 running backs that are going to be really receiving most of the carries are Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson. Those 2 combined for over 1,500 yards and 24 touchdowns. The receivers that Green will be looking to go to are Hudson Clement and Jaden Bray coming in from Oklahoma State, and then also tight end Cole Taylor. Defensively, pretty middle of the road, struggled a little bit against the pass, ranking 85th. They were 62nd in scoring, 46th in rushing, and 66th in total defense. Their 3 main guys to watch that are returning this year are defensive end, kind of at each at 3 levels. Defensive end, Sean Martin, linebacker, Tyron Bradley, and safety, Aubrey Burke. And then they bring in a cornerback transfer from Northwestern. The Wildcats have done a pretty good job producing defensive backs recently. Look at Garrett Newsome being drafted by the Cleveland Browns, and they're going to be bringing in Garrett Hollins Jr., who I think should be a solid addition and help kind of aid in that pass defense. Out of those 2 teams, I think West Virginia I think they'll be in contention for the Big 12 title, and I think Texas Tech probably should have grouped them in that first video I made as a team fighting for bowl eligibility. Moving on ahead, The team that's projected by many to finish sixth in the conference is Iowa State. They were 7-6 last year, 6-3 in the conference. They bring back the most out of any team in this conference, 19 starters, 9 on both offense and defense, and their punter. They were just 1-6 last year in games decided by, or 1-6 over the last 3 years, in games decided by 4 points or less. Last year they had a +8 turnover margin, so I think for Iowa State, if they can kind of flip things down the stretch in those close games, that could be big for them. Offensively, they were 70th in scoring, 101st in rushing, 49th passing, 79th in total offense. Rocco Becht leads the way at quarterback, Abu Sama III at running back, and then they have a duo of wide receivers, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, and tight end Benjamin Brahmer is also returning with a significant amount of production. All 5 offensive linemen returned this year, so Iowa State, while they didn't really wow, they were top 50 barely in passing. Outside of that, they were 70th or worse. If they can start to make some improvements on the offensive side of the ball, their defense is pretty solid overall. They're losing an All-American level cornerback in TJ Tampa, but this unit ranked 42nd in scoring, 37th rush, 73rd in pass, and 50th in total. Linebacker Caleb Bacon leads the way. He had 8 quarterback hurries, 3 sacks, and then some of the DBs who will look to step up in the absence of Tampa are Bo Frailer, Jeremiah Cooper, and Malik Verdon. And another thing that's very important for the Cyclones this year is to improve their pass rush. I think they're a team that I have after going through the schedule. They have some games here and there that I think are winnable. They have a few games that I think are going to be really, really tough to win. I guess that's not too, a beacon of wisdom there, but I could certainly see them. In fact, when I was going through the projections, kind of winning one game, then losing the next one. I think probably they're a 7-5 type team. I think 8-4 is within the realm of possibility, and finishing kind of in the upper middle half of the Big 12. Coming in at number 5, this is a team that I have really high expectations for, the Arizona Wildcats. And I know that's kind of maybe a surprise because they lost head coach Jedd Fisch and about half of their team, at least in terms of starters, but they're still bringing back just a little bit over half of 12 starters coming back, 6 offense, 5 defense, and their kicker. They ended last season on a 7-game winning streak. They had a +5 turnover margin. Head coach Brett Brennan comes in. He's joined by offensive coordinator Dino Babers, formerly of Syracuse, and defensive coordinator Dwayne Akine. Offense, they ranked 18th in scoring, 85th in rushing, but 8th nationally in passing and 20th in total. They have the former high school teammates at quarterback and wide receiver Noah Fafita and Tatoy Roa McMillan. Those 2 guys are going to be key pieces. They also have 3 offensive linemen starters returning, led by left tackle Raymond Pulido and right tackle Jonah Saveanea. Hope I said that right. Defensively, they were also fairly solid. They did struggle against the pass as well, but that might be down to playing in the Pac-12 conference where a lot of teams pass the ball a lot, and nationally speaking, many of those teams ranked in the bottom half or even like the bottom third nationally. 29th in scoring, 25th against the rush, 90th against the pass, and 48th in total defense. Trey Smith is the defensive end to look out for. Jacob Manu, who is also one of the teammates with Fafita and McMillan in high school, at linebacker, and then free safety Gunnar Maldonado. A couple of other guys are the star position, Traden Stokes, and strong safety Dalton Johnson. I think this defensive unit should be able to improve this year. They have 5 starters coming back, so it's about half of the defense. Those guys that I mentioned are key contributors, and I think Arizona is very well positioned to compete in this Big 12. I think they have a fairly considerable, fairly manageable schedule, and I think the Wildcats could do very well. Continuing on, Kansas State went 9-4 last year, 6-3 in the conference. They bring back 12 starters, 4 offense, 7 defense, and their kicker. Avery Johnson takes over at quarterback for Will Howard, who transferred to Ohio State. Johnson, in total in the season was 23 for 35 for 301 yards, 3 touchdowns, and added 225 yards and 6 touchdowns on 45 rushes. In the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which they won over North Carolina State, Johnson totaled 427 yards passing and rushing and 5 touchdowns. So there's a lot of offseason hype surrounding him. He didn't produce over an entire season, so I think that will be important to see. It's kind of like the situation with Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee. But I think there's an opportunity here for Johnson to step into the role. There's a lot of pressure and expectations on him, but I'm interested to see how he can do. He's going to be leading an offense that ranked high in many of the national rankings. They were 10th in scoring, 11th rush, and 23rd in total. They were just 53rd in passing, but they kind of depend on the ground game a little bit more anyways. DJ Giddens rushed for over 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns, and they also bring in Dylan Edwards from Colorado. Wide receiver and kick returner Keegan Johnson is one of the guys to watch on offense, one of the players to watch. And their center, Hadley Panzer, anchors the offensive line. Defensively, they were a pretty dependable unit, I would say. 26th in scoring, 54th against the rush, 68th pass, and 57th in total defense. They had a plus 12 turnover margin, so they did a good job of keeping it on offense and creating takeaways on defense. Their 3 guys to really keep an eye on are Austin Moore, cornerback Jacob Parrish, and safety Marquez Sigel. Then coming in at number 3 in the preseason rankings. These aren't my preseason rankings. I'll put the order at the end of this video of what I think the final order in the conference will be. Kansas, they were 9-4 last year, 5-4 in conference. They've got 12 starters, 6 offense, 5 defense, and punter coming back. Offensively, they were 4th in scoring last year, 34th rushing, and 6th in passing yards per game, and 3rd in total yards per game. Coming back is quarterback Jalen Daniels. The question is going to be, can he stay healthy this year, especially considering the fact that they do not have a backup of the caliber of Jason Bean this year. So that's going to be the big question. But again, these Jayhawks still rank 6th in passing, even without Daniels. Their wide receiver kind of trio is going to be Lawrence Arnold, Quentin Skinner, and Luke Grimm, and then tight end Jared Casey is also a valuable piece of the offense. And then running back Devin Neal also helped, lead this Jayhawks team to a top 35 rushing attack. On defense, they were a little bit more middle of the road, and they had just a +1 turnover margin, 64th in scoring, 88th in rush, 56th pass, and 62nd in total. Linebacker Cornell Wheeler is the player to watch, kind of in what many people call an undersized front 7 that could be difficult against teams that can really run the ball well in this conference, teams like Oklahoma State, like even West Virginia. That could prove to be a test for the Jayhawks. But their secondary is really solid. They have 4 guys coming back with starting experience, and that's led by especially Kobe Bryant at cornerback, and on the opposite side, Mello Dotson. Bryant is a very highly touted player who is expected to be taken in the NFL draft coming up next year. Coming in at number 2 in the preseason rankings that I pull from is Utah. They were 8-5, 5-4 in the Pac-12 last year. They come over. I think it's between them and Arizona as to who's going to be the best newcomer in the conference. Colorado could, but I think both of these teams are going to be more actually competing for the Big 12 title. 13 starters come back, 4 offense, 7 defense, and their kicker and punter. Both quarterback Cam Rising and tight end Brant Keith are back from injury last year. That'll be important not only for their abilities on the field, but also for their leadership. Offensively, kind of the Utes had a little bit of a downer last year, 98th in scoring, 33rd in rushing, so they still did that well. 117th passing and 92nd in total yardage. Running back Micah Bernard, and in addition from Idaho, an all Big Sky first teamer, I believe, Anthony Woods with 1,100 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns. And then their wide receivers, Money Parks was the leading receiver last year, and they're bringing in Dorian Singer, who had a good season at Arizona in 2022 and a little bit of a drop-off last year at USC, but is a very highly touted and talented receiver that will be important to pair with Parks and for Rising to throw to. And then offensive tackle Spencer Fano is one of the top players on this team to watch. Defensively, that's the unit that this team relies on. They were just 65th against the pass, but again, that's probably down in part to playing in the Pac-12. I think with that ranking, they were one of the top defenses against the pass in the Pac-12 last year, but they also ranked 4th in the country against the rush, 13th in total yards per game allowed, and 19th in scoring. So they were able to keep teams off the board, and I think that'll be vitally important. The guys to watch on that defense are defensive tackle Keanu Tanuvasa, linebacker Lander Barton, cornerback Zamaya Vaughn, and free safety Tao Johnson. And the big question is, can the offense match the excellence that the defense played with last year as Cam Rising comes back to quarterback the team? And I think the answer to that is probably yes. Their key game will be against Oklahoma State early. I think it's week 3 or 4. I know it's September 21st. So I believe that'd be week 3. That'll be a very important early game that could determine which of these teams kind of takes the forefront in the Big 12. And speaking of those Cowboys, Oklahoma State, last year's runner-up in the Big 12 to Texas, 10-4, 7-2 in conference. They have the second most amount of production coming back with 18 starters, second to Iowa State, 9 offense, 8 defense, and their punter. Their offense is obviously led by Ollie Gordon, who had 1,700 yards last year and was the Doak Walker winner last year. The offense was 53rd in scoring, only 67th in the rush, so I think what's going to be interesting to watch is the depth of this rushing attack, because outside of Ollie Gordon, that shows that they probably weren't doing much at all. Helping with that this year will be A.J. Green coming in from Arkansas, so I think that'll be important for the Cowboys, just collective effort. And then 25th passing and 30th in total offense. Alan Bowman at quarterback returns. I think he's in his 7th year of eligibility. He's been kind of all over the place. Has lots of experience. I think that could be helpful for the team this year. And then they have a wide receiver trio of Brennan Presley, Rashad Owens, and Dejon Stribling. And then defensively, this is where the issues really popped up last year. I mean, we saw it even early on again in a loss to South Alabama. And then we see it later in the season in a blowout loss against Central Florida 45-3, and even in the Big 12 championship game, allowing I think 49 points to Texas. The guys that are going to be important in leading that improvement this year are linebackers Nick Martin and Colin Oliver, cornerback Corey Black, and safety Kendall Daniels. Going over these teams in conference, I think Utah is a maybe not clear number 1, but I think they are the team that I am slating in the number 1 spot. Again, that September 21st game against Oklahoma State will be very important. I'll have to verify this. No, I was going to say, I was wondering I think it is actually week 4. I said earlier it was week 3. I know there's a couple games this year in the Big 12 that are those weird, like they're still technically non-conference game, even though they're conference opponents now. But that game, I believe, is the Big 12 opener for both of these teams. So that game is very important. I think Utah is there in the number 1 spot. I have Arizona finishing at 2nd in the conference this year, and I think if I was going game by game, I think I had Arizona beating Utah in the regular season, but I could see at a neutral site Utah coming back and winning that conference championship game to seal that playoff spot. I think both teams probably have 2 losses going into that one, so I don't see a world in which the loser gets into the college football playoff unless the Big Ten and SEC have, only one or, a couple of teams that end up with 1 or 2 or fewer losses. Coming in at 3rd, this is where things start to get a little murky. I had a lot of teams that were kind of around 7-3. I think Oklahoma State's defensive issues will pop up again, and I think that'll cause them to drop a little bit. If I had to pick right now in that number 3 spot, it would probably be Kansas, followed closely behind and really just behind on tiebreakers by UCF, Colorado, and perhaps West Virginia. I think those are the teams that would be kind of around that 6-3 territory in conference. And then in that kind of 5-4, Iowa State in conference, Kansas State, and then I think I had Houston at 4-5, and Texas Tech out of these teams, I think I have the furthest down. So as I talk through that, I'll have the order pop up on screen. But that's kind of my projections for the Big 12 this year. I'll make a final decision when I go over my conference champions right before the season starts. I'll do kind of a college football playoff predictions, right before week 0, before things kick off in Ireland with Florida State and Georgia Tech. So stay tuned for that. On a final decision right now, I'm leaning towards Utah. If you saw my previous video, I'm leaning towards Florida to beat Clemson, but I think Clemson might win the regular season game. So kind of the same case as what I have here. 2 teams that meet in the regular season face off for the conference title and a CFP bid. That's all for my predictions in the Big 12 conference for this year. Coming up after a short break that I'll be taking, I'm going to start probably diving into the Big 10. Or if I don't do that first, I might start taking a look at the group of, 6 now? But the conferences that are not in the Power 4. So stay tuned for those videos. Probably will go Big 10 first, but I'll make a decision on that shortly. But if you stuck around, thank you so much for taking the time to watch College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.